Welcome back, everyone. So much to talk about today. A lot happening on the world stage, and even some news here at home. We'll jump right into it. March 8th, 2025.
Let's do it.
Okay, Ukraine first. President Trump's really stirring things up with his take on the whole situation, calling out President Zelensky, saying Ukraine's tougher to deal with than Russia. Can you believe that?
Yeah?
Plus, he's frozen U.S. military aid and stopped sharing intel with Kyiv.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head-scratcher, this strategy. Pulling back from Ukraine on one hand, but then really leaning on Russia on the other, threatening sanctions and tariffs, saying Russia's just hammering Ukraine on the battlefield. Seems like he wants to strong-arm both sides into a deal that works for the U.S., you know?
That's what it looks like. There are reports he's pushing for Ukraine to give the U.S. a piece of their mineral resources, all in exchange for a truce with Moscow.
Yep, that's the word on the street. And to make things even more interesting, he's temporarily cut off Ukraine's access to some crucial satellite images from Maxar, you know, the kind they need for intel during a conflict. It's a big move.
So where does this leave Zelensky? It can't be easy being in his position right now.
Definitely not. He needs the U.S., but he also has to look out for Ukraine. He's been trying to smooth things over with Trump after that public disagreement, even send an apology letter. But at the same time, he's pushing for strong security guarantees for Ukraine if any deal goes through.
It's like walking a tightrope. And in the meantime, the conflict just keeps grinding on. 11 people were killed, many more injured in that Russian strike on Dobropia.
It's awful, really puts things in perspective. Residential buildings were hit, and there are reports that even emergency responders were targeted in a second strike. Just tragic.
Okay, switching gears to Syria now. Things are really escalating there. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is saying government forces executed a bunch of Alawites in Latakia, the coastal province.
Yeah, that's worrying. The Alawites, that's President Assad's religious group, a minority facing a lot of persecution already, caught in the middle of it all.
And with this latest violence, the whole region's basically shut down. Curfew in place, power's been cut to the entire province.
It's a tinderbox, that's for sure. The UN's pretty worried, calling for everyone to cool it. But with tension so high, who knows if anyone's listening?
Closer to home now, some troubling news out of Toronto. 12 people injured in a pub shooting near Scarborough City Centre.
It's just senseless. 6 people were shot, others got hurt in the chaos.
Police are on the hunt for 3 guys. One was seen taking off in a silver car. Mayor Olivia Chow saying they're throwing everything they've got at finding whoever did this.
Hopefully they catch them soon. Now to some weather news. Australia is dealing with tropical storm Alfred. Heavy rain and strong winds hitting the east coast.
It was a cyclone, got downgraded, but it's still causing a lot of problems. Mass blackouts, over 300,000 properties affected. They're telling people in the storm's path to get out or stay put inside.
It's headed for Brisbane. Emergency services are ready. Schools are closed, airports are shut down, public transport's on hold. Crews are working to get the power back on, but some folks might be in the dark for days.
Turning to the U.S., a mix of news here. First, Hollywood's mourning the loss of Gene Hackman, the Oscar-winning actor. He died of natural causes at 95.
A true legend he was. Hackman, known for roles in so many films, The French Connection, Unforgiven, and so many more. And it's even more tragic because his wife, Betsy Arakawa, just passed away a week before him from some rare respiratory illness.
It's terribly sad. Even more heartbreaking, reports are saying that Hackman, with his Alzheimer's, he might not have even known his wife was gone. They found them in their Santa Fe home after neighbors asked for a welfare check.
It's a poignant end to a life so full of achievement. But switching gears completely, there's some real drama going on in Washington. President Trump had this heated cabinet meeting trying to address concerns about Elon Musk's cost cutting. You know, he's the head of that Department of Government Efficiency Task Force, DOGE, they call it.
Musk, in government. I still can't believe it.
It's something else, isn't it? Especially with his style, well, his style in general.
And it sounds like that style isn't winning everyone over. There were clashes with Secretary of State Rubio and Transportation Secretary Duffy all over staff and budget cuts.
Well, Trump was giving Musk a lot of leeway initially, but now he seems to be rethinking that. He stepped in during the meeting, made it clear that while he backs DOGE, the cabinet secretaries are the ones calling the shots. Musk's team, they're just advisors now.
So is he putting Musk on a tighter leash or just trying to calm down some worried cabinet members? It's hard to say, especially since Musk was later seen hopping on Air Force One with Trump, heading off for a weekend at Mar-a-Lago.
It's par for the course. Wouldn't be the first time this administration sent mixed signals. Only time will tell what it means for Musk's role and influence.
Let's talk about some crime stories now making headlines. First, one that's really got people talking about the death penalty here in the U.S.
Brad Sigmund, convicted of double murder in South Carolina, he's become the first inmate executed by firing squad in 15 years.
Firing squad. It's a grim way to go. What's the story there?
So, Sigmund was convicted back in 2001, murdered his ex-girlfriend's parents with the baseball bat. He chose the firing squad over electrocution and lethal injection. Those are the other options in South Carolina.
It's a sobering reminder of the weight of these decisions and all the moral questions around capital punishment.
Absolutely. This case has everyone debating not just about the death penalty itself, but also how it's carried out and how much information people should have about the whole process. Sigmund's lawyer tried to get a stay of execution, said the state wasn't being transparent about lethal injection, but the request was denied.
Okay, so from a U.S. crime story to one with global implications.
A whole Russian spy ring busted in the UK, convicted for their activities all over Europe.
This is like something out of a movie. What were they doing?
Basically, they were tracking and planning attacks on Putin's enemies, journalists, dissidents, even Ukrainian soldiers. Led by this guy, Orlan Rusev, they were using fake IDs, high-tech surveillance gear. They were planning honey traps, kidnappings, even assassinations.
That's scary stuff. How are they connected to Russia?
The whole operation was run by this former exec from Wirecard, a German payment processing company. Jan Marsalik's his name. He's got ties to Russian intelligence. They even talked about selling captured U.S. drones to China.
This is huge. How'd they finally get caught?
Well, they had this elaborate plan to spy on Ukrainian soldiers training in Germany. That's what tripped them up.
No, a crime story that hits close to home here in Canada.
It's a sad one. They found the remains of Morgan Harris, an Indigenous woman. She was murdered by that Canadian serial killer, Jeremy Skibicki. Found her in a landfill.
It's a small bit of closure, I guess. But it also reminds us of something really awful.
Yeah, the fact that so many Indigenous women go missing and are murdered in Canada.
Harris was one of 4 Indigenous women Skibicki killed. He dumped their bodies in landfills. They started searching for her remains at the Prairie Green landfill after a lot of pressure from Indigenous leaders. The police weren't too keen on it at first.
It's a terrible situation. Shows how much needs to be done to protect these communities.
Let's move on to global tensions now. Poland's really beefing up its defenses, reacting to, well, just about everything that's been going on.
It's a sign of the times for sure. Prime Minister Tusk, he's announced mandatory military training for all men, and he's pushing for a massive boost in defense spending.
We're talking a potential army of 500,000, including reservists. That's a serious commitment.
And there's more. Poland's thinking about leaving those international agreements that ban landmines and cluster munitions.
That's a major escalation. What's behind all of this?
They're on edge in Poland. The war in Ukraine is right there on their border, and President Trump halting military aid to Ukraine, well, that just made things worse.
So it's like they're getting ready for the worst possible outcome.
It seems that way. Tusk even said he wants Poland to have its own nuclear weapons. He admitted it's a long shot, but it shows how seriously they're taking things.
Okay, lastly, let's talk about how President Trump's actions are affecting America's relationships around the world. This America First approach is causing friction, even with some of their closest allies.
Yeah, Denmark's a good example. They've always been a strong supporter of the U.S., but now they're feeling betrayed and threatened, all because of Trump's comments about wanting to buy Greenland.
Greenland, it's a Danish territory, really important strategically, but it also has a lot of cultural and historical significance for them. Trump's comments have really upset the Danes. They see it as disrespectful, like the U.S. doesn't care about them anymore.
It's understandable. A lot of Danes feel like Trump's actions just don't line up with the values they share, the sacrifices they've made alongside U.S. troops. They've fought and died with Americans in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on. These comments hurt.
And now it's sparked this whole debate in Denmark about Greenland becoming independent and whether Denmark's even safe anymore, with the U.S. being so unpredictable.
It's a complex situation, shows how much impact Trump's foreign policy decisions are having. He might be putting America first, but he might be messing up some really important alliances that kept things stable for a long time.
It's a tough spot for sure, and Denmark's not alone. Canadians are also feeling the pressure from Trump's policies, especially those tariffs.
It's interesting to see how they're dealing with it all. There's this mix of defiance, patriotism, anxiety. You see businesses boycotting U.S. products, others finding ways to show their national pride.
It's a real movement coming from the ground up.
Yeah.
Pubs taking American stuff off their menus, shops refusing to stock U.S. goods. It's a way to say, we're not happy, and support their own economy at the same time.
Exactly. It goes beyond just the money. It's about who they are as a nation. Remember that video, the one with actor Jeff Douglas, where he pushed back against Trump's 51st state comment? It was a big deal for Canadians.
It was huge. It really captured how Canadians feel.
Mm.
Proud of their country, not wanting to be treated like some afterthought.
It shows how important national identity is, how it shapes how a country reacts to pressure from outside.
And even though some of those tariffs have been lifted or put on hold, the damage is done, for sure. The U.S.-Canada relationship, it's taken a hit. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future, and the economic impact is a real concern.
It goes to show that political decisions have real consequences, consequences that can spread far and wide.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. and Canada, it'll be interesting to see what happens. They're going to need some careful diplomacy, some willingness to rebuild trust on both sides.
So that's the news for today. We covered a lot: international conflicts, political drama, some stories that really hit home.
It's been a lot to process.
It has, but it's important to stay informed, to
Mhm.
keep up with what's happening in the world, even when it's tough. So before we go, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, what stories stood out for you today? What are you thinking about? What questions do you have?
Tell us what's on your mind. Leave a comment on the website, send us an email, connect with us on social media. We always want to hear from you. Keep the conversation going.
And don't forget, we'll be back on Monday with more news and analysis from around the world. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
It's been a lot to take in, that's for sure. But before we sign off, there's one more story I think we should touch on.
Yeah, out of all the news today, something has to stick with us.
You know what's really gotten to me? It's how President Trump's actions are impacting things globally. We discussed how Denmark and Canada are feeling the heat, but it seems like his America First stance is making a lot of U.S. allies nervous.
That's definitely a trend we've seen throughout today's news. Countries that have always stood by the U.S., they're starting to wonder about their relationships, rethink their place in the world.
Makes you think about the future of these global alliances and America's role.
Yeah, and it's not just about hurt feelings or diplomatic missteps. There are real consequences.
When countries don't trust each other, you get instability, misunderstandings, even a greater risk of conflict. It's like a domino effect. Things can spiral out of control.
Feels like the world's changing. These long-standing alliances are being put to the test, and new power dynamics are emerging.
It'll be interesting to watch, maybe a little scary too, how this all plays out over the next few years. Will the U.S. step up as a global leader again? Or are we headed for a world where everyone's going their own way, forming new alliances, new rivalries?
Those are some big questions, no easy answers there.
It reminds us that everything's connected. What one country does impacts everyone else.
You're right. I think that's a good note to end on for today. We've gone through a lot, definitely given us all something to think about.
It has, but that's why it's so important to stay informed, to understand what's going on in the world.
Couldn't agree more. By wrapping our heads around these complex issues, we can hopefully have more productive conversations and, in the end, maybe work towards a world that's more peaceful, more stable.
I like that. Thanks for taking this journey through the news with us today.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday with more insights and analysis. Until then, have a fantastic weekend.